Results are in from Iowa, and former President Donald Trump gets the first big win of the 2024 election.
Fox 5 political analyst Charles Chamberlain is here to break down what comes next. Charles, good morning and good to see you.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing okay. Trump won big.
Big.
Really big. 50% of the vote.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have a good night?
I don't think so. I think Nikki Haley, the former governor from South Carolina, was on the verge of a good night. Had she come in second, that'd have been a lot of great momentum coming into New Hampshire. She came in a close third to second, so we'll see if some of that momentum carries over. But Trump had a good night, 50% of the vote. A lot of what we were trying to find out was, is he going to break that 50% threshold? Can he consolidate those Republican votes there? And to an extent, he did.
Let's talk about, we were talking about, they polled a lot of these caucus goers, and something like 2/3 of them still believe the election was stolen, still believed a lot of these things that had been discussed over the last 4 years. Moving into New Hampshire, what does that tell you about the voting bloc for President Trump and the others trying to take that nomination?
Well, I think with New Hampshire, we can actually throw a lot of that away. The reason being is that New Hampshire is completely different demographically from Iowa. You've got a lot of the religious right in Iowa. You have a lot of Christian conservatives there. I think 6 in 10 of Iowa caucus members identified themselves as evangelists. That percentage in New Hampshire, 25%. So that's going to be completely different.
Interesting. Would you point to one particular group? Who were the losers last night, if anything? You said Nikki Haley came in third, but barely, by like 1 percentage point. Vivek is out.
Yep.
So how do you kind of analyze all that?
Well, clearly, Vivek's a loser.
Sure.
But DeSantis, I think, he put all his eggs into one basket, spending somewhere around 35 million in that race. This was the largest spend ever. Nikki Haley spent 37, but she's also gaining money from a lot of super PACs in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And I believe DeSantis is actually bleeding money. So now he's actually going to fly straight to South Carolina. He's not even going to go to New Hampshire right now. He may come back and do that. But that's where he expected to win, and that's where he expected to carry his campaign. And it just didn't turn out that way. New Hampshire's almost a two-neck race between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump at this point. But after that, all the numbers elsewhere say Donald Trump.
Taking these results from last night, what does this now mean moving forward?
It means that we are very much looking like we're going to see the race that nobody wanted to see, which is former President Donald Trump against Joe Biden. It also means...
Didn't you say that, though, when you were here a few months ago and I asked you who's going to be on the ticket? And you said that. Yeah.
And it also means that we're going to have a very, very strategic narrow race. They're just going to go to the states that Trump is going to go to states that he lost, and Biden's going to be seeking to protect some of those states that he won. We're going to be looking at Georgia. We're going to be looking at the typical swing states as they always are, and it's going to be a very, very narrowly focused race, unfortunately. So in some states where you might see more ads, you're just not going to see that this time at all.
I wanted to ask this as I realized Donald Trump just entered the courtroom a few minutes ago. Does the civil trial hurt Donald Trump with Republicans? Do any of these trials hurt Donald Trump with Republicans? It seems like what he says is true. That's like, hey, every time he's in a courtroom, it's like free publicity.
Yeah, I was thinking about this in the car over here. I feel like anybody who's anti-Trump or against Trump, it's kind of like when you've got that favorite football team and you know you're not a complete team, like your defense is lacking or your offense is lacking, and you're like, we can still make it to the dance. We can still get
Sure.
No, he's a complete offense and a complete defense. He's not losing. He's not moving. He's getting to the Super Bowl at this point. I think every state has lined up behind Trump. I think if Nikki Haley, she has a fighting chance in New Hampshire, but after that, I've been looking at the numbers in South Carolina, she's down by 30 points, average.
Goodness.
So unless she can make up that ground, I believe the South Carolina primary is February 24th. She's got some time but it don't look good.
Now, what about the New Hampshire primary? That's coming up next. What are we going to see there, you think?
I think the numbers look. She's within striking distance. The former governor of South Carolina. The last set of numbers that I have was that Donald Trump was polling at 44%. Nikki Haley's went 28%. The difference maker is that the former governor of New Jersey dropped out, Chris Christie. He had 12%. And a lot of those folks said that their second choice was Nikki Haley. So if she takes those Chris Christie numbers, we believe some of that 4% of Vivek Ramaswamy is going to go to Trump. We don't know how folks are going to feel about DeSantis. She's within striking distance, and she could make a move there. So I think it's a two-horse race in New Hampshire between Trump and Nikki Haley, and this is big for her.
Polls exist for a reason. They're fun to talk about, and they kind of guide the way. The latest polls that I read a couple days ago had all three of the Republican candidates beating Joe Biden in the general election come November. What does the president need to do to up his numbers? They are lower than they've been.
Yeah.
So what needs to happen on that side to make it a closer race, I guess? If all three, DeSantis, Haley, and Trump would beat Joe Biden in November?
I'm of two minds to this question. A lot of people like to say that he needs to connect with voters, that he needs to show that he's still sharp. Unfortunately, a lot of folks look at him like he is he's not all there. And he needs to show that he can connect with voters, that he's still on top of it, that he's hard charging. The other part of it too, though, is a lot of Americans right now, a lot of the times it comes down to kitchen table issues. A lot of Americans don't feel like they're better off than they were 4 years ago. A lot of them are feeling the crunch of inflation. They're feeling the crunch of gas prices. They're feeling the crunch of everyday food prices, and inflation is really taking a toll.
Yeah.
You've got these numerous wars that are happening as well. Whether you're talking about Russia and Ukraine, or you're talking about Israel, there's a lot right now that make a lot of folks just feel like, you know what? I just don't feel safe.
Right.
I don't feel successful, and I think that's also a policy issue as well.
Sure. All right. We got a long way to go in this election here.
Yeah.
Charles Chamberlain, we thank you for coming in.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Good to see
No
you.
problem.
Okay.